police continue their investigations, the rest of the world is remembering one of the greatest acting careers in the history of Hollywood. From the most thrilling car chase in movie history to the greatest criminal mind on earth.
Lex Luthor.
Gene Hackman was Hollywood's acting elite.
I'm not talking about dance lessons. I'm talking about putting a brick through the other guy's windshield.
His prolific career, spanning 4 decades and including almost 80 films, saw Gene decorated with 2 Oscars, 2 BAFTAs and 3 Golden Globes. Born in 1930, a California native, by the time he was 13, his father left him.
I was down the street playing with some guys, and he drove by and kind of waved.
At 16, Hackman signed up to the Marines, spending 4 years with the military before leaving to try his hand at acting, inspired by tough guy James Jimmy Cagney.
Come out and take it, you dirty yellow-bellied rat, or I'll give it to you through the door.
It wasn't until he was 37 that Gene got his big break after receiving a nomination for Best Supporting Actor in the 1967 Bonnie and Clyde.
Take a good look, Pop. I'm Buck Barrel.
For the rest of the 20th century, he had audiences at the edge of their seats.
Can you see it? Huh?
In hysterics.
I told him white would make me look fat.
And truly inspired.
In my book, we're gonna be winners.
I think it's going to be remembered as an actor with an unbelievable hit rate. The man gave really no bad performance his entire career.
At 74, Hackman had enough of the screen.
it's probably all over.
Avoiding roles as the Hollywood grandfather, he spent the following 20 years painting, writing fiction, and enjoying exercise. The last known sighting of Gene in April, going for a stroll near his home in Santa Fe. Since the actor's death, an outpouring of grief and respect has flooded the internet from Hollywood and beyond. Legendary actor Bill Murray recalling what working with Hackman was like.
He was a tough nut, Gene Hackman, but he was really good. And he was really difficult.
Survived by his 3 children, tonight the world is remembering one of Hollywood's true greats.
Well, Gary Fleder is a film director who worked with Hackman in one of his last movies, the 2003 hit Runaway Jury. Gary, thank you so much for being with us today. Just how are you feeling?
You know, I woke up this morning here in Toronto, Ontario, pretty misty, pretty sad about it. You know, I knew he was in his 90s, but, you know, it sort of reminds you that, I mean, they're human, and it makes us realize that we're also on that train. But no, I just, you know, I knew the day was coming, but like having a relative or a friend who's older or maybe even sick, you still have the shock.
What was the last contact that you had with Gene?
I think it was actually at a press. I remember it was a press junk. He didn't come to the premiere of the movie. He was just here's the thing about Gene that has to be understood. He was a very shy guy. He didn't live in Hollywood. He lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He had a beautiful home. He played golf. He was a writer. And I think he just, he avoided Hollywood. And I remember he liked the movie. I talked to him at the press junket, but he just didn't give a crap about going to these premieres and these screenings. I think he felt it was an imposition. There's a picture of him for the movie, The Conversation. He reminded me so much of that character, you know, sort of quiet and soft-spoken, but there was this internal an intensity and maybe, you know, the anger that sort of sat there. And I think that's what you feel about some of these actors like Pacino and De Niro and certainly and Hackman, this intensity and this anger that kind of sits there, which makes him feel somewhat dangerous, you know?
Yeah, it's lovely to hear you be able to talk to him in that personal way, talking about the love and the admiration that you have for him. But what was it that set Gene apart as an actor for you?
That's a great question. There was never a single frame that wasn't authentic, a single shot that wasn't authentic. And it's funny because I had a certain intimidation factor in directing him because, first of all, being a film nerd as much as a filmmaker, just to work with a guy who'd been in all these amazing movies. So for me, I remember occasionally we'd be doing a scene in Runaway Jury, and in the war room scene, like he was sort of running the war room for this corrupt jury corruption scandal. And I remember a few times, I didn't love a certain performance or maybe a certain choice he was making. And I'd say, cut. And I'd say, Gene, he goes, I know, act better. And that's true. I love that about him. The other thing I loved about Gene is that I remember vividly that when we were lighting a shot for the film, he wouldn't leave the set. Many actors, they say, are we done with my shot? And then they F off back to their trailer. And he never left. He wanted to sit there and be in his chair and read his lines, read his sides, and be present. And one of the funny things for those inside baseball ideas, he would take his script and he would cross out all the parentheticals and all the directions saying, telling him how to act the scene. So all that was left were his dialogue, his words. And again, it was the idea that to your question, he was such an intelligent guy and so intuitive. He didn't want to be told how to do his job. It came from him. He just had this wonderful instinct about his craft. And looking back to that time I spent with him on the film, I just, like I said, never a moment that didn't feel authentic.
What was he like on set with other actors? Because obviously you got to see this firsthand.
So I think that Gene understood his own boundaries. That he wasn't going to do something that he felt was silly or he'd make a fool of himself. I think that wasn't who he was. And I'm going to be very honest about this. He didn't suffer fools. Gene was very precise. He'd do 2 or 3 takes. They were perfect, and he'd move on. And Dustin was very much like, let's do 15 takes. Let's try this. Let's try that. He was very almost manic. And I remember thinking, well, how's this going to go? Because they love each other. They have respect, but there's also a process conflict, right? Again, there was that contrast. But on set, he definitely liked actors that were prepared, that were passionate. And one more thing is that it's amazing. I'd say to him, who do you like? And he said, I love Jack Nicholson. Oh. I love Nicholson because he just was he found Nicholson to be so joyful. Whatever he did, there was a joy in the work. There was a passion in the work. And Gene loved that about him. There was a movie that actually Gene turned down with Mike Nichols called Wolf. I think it's a werewolf movie or something where he becomes a wolf. And Gene said to me, I don't know how can I be a wolf? I can't be a wolf. But he said Nicholson could do it because Nicholson's like, I'll be a wolf.
Well, so many great elements of his career and life to look back on. How do you think Gene Hackman will be remembered?
The first word I got this morning when I got the first message about Gene was somebody wrote to me just the word legend. And I think that we have to accept the fact that in the music world, it's a David Bowie or a Prince, somebody, a James Brown, and it's just, they will never go away. They'll never fade. They really are immortal in the scope of that art. Gene Hackman is that.
How special that you're part of that immortality. Gary, we thank you so much for being so generous with your memories of the wonderful Gene, because we know that it is still a really raw day. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.